Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Laurie Marbas, and I'm so honored to welcome Jeff Tkach. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Laurie?
Good, thank you. So Jeff, you're the Chief Impact Officer at Rodale Institute, and some of us may not be familiar with one, the Rodale Institute, but also what a Chief Impact Officer is. So can you kind of give us a little history of both, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, and history is exactly what's in store here because Rodale Institute has actually been around for 7 decades. And we're widely known as the global leader in regenerative agriculture. Our founder, J.I. Rodale, is the person who actually coined the term organic as it's used today. And he's known as being the pioneer of the entire organic food and farming movement in North America. So he established the Rodale Institute in 1947. And he actually really was credited with really establishing this whole industry, which is now a $100 billion industry worldwide. Rodale Institute is a research and education organization. We're a nonprofit based in Eastern Pennsylvania. And we've been putting the hard science to this idea of organic agriculture for 70 years. So we have a team of PhD scientists here and a 333-acre farm, which we call a living laboratory. And every square inch of this farm is devoted to do the research that is helping farmers all over the world to adopt regenerative organic practices on their farms. I joined the organization about 26 months ago. What's really interesting is that I served on the board of directors prior to becoming an employee here. And over the context of my tenure on the board, I just fell more and more in love with the mission, and it felt very much a part of me as a person, particularly because of some of the things that I've gone through with my own health. And I felt so indebted to this organization that I asked them for a job. And our CEO and I have known each other for a long time and have a great friendship and relationship. And he asked me to join the organization to really help position Rodale Institute as a household name. We really want to become known among consumers across America and around the world. We're very well known in the science community and in the agricultural community, but we want to begin to touch consumers. And so in order to do that, we measure our success on impact. As a nonprofit, we're in the business of having impact, and we measure our impact on whether or not we're helping farmers and farmland transition away from chemical-dependent agriculture to organic methods. And so in my role, I oversee all the external affairs of the organization. Jeff kind of split the organization, Jeff Moyer, our CEO, split the organization in half. And so I oversee all efforts that are outwardly facing for the Institute.
So I got so many questions down. So can you tell me what's the difference between regenerative and organic, or are these this one and the same, or is it a completely different process?
That's an awesome question, and you're not alone in asking that. That's on the minds of many people right now. Mm-hmm. So the word regenerative has begun to build momentum in our vernacular over the last couple of years. We're hearing people move away from this word sustainability and toward the word regenerative. And that makes Rodale Institute very happy because not only did J.I. Rodale, our founder, coin the term organic, but his son, Robert Rodale, who was equally a visionary and our leader up until 1990, Robert Rodale began using the word regenerative in front of agriculture back in the 70s because he felt that he was a world traveler, and he was spending a lot of time in Africa and Asia and parts of the world where he was looking at agricultural systems that were fundamentally broken. And he was saying to himself, what is here to be sustained? There's nothing worth sustaining. And so he felt like the word regenerative better applied because we needed to create agricultural systems that would make the soil better, that would make people consuming the food better, that would ultimately make communities better. And so that's where the word regenerative came from. The word, to answer your question, regenerative organic, it's a farming production system that really, it's more than just taking the chemicals out of farming. So, there's the USDA organic certification that all of us know. When we go to the grocery store, we see that little logo on food items. And that's really great. In fact, Rodale helped to pass that legislation back in 1990 and all the way through to 2000 when that label ended up on shelves. Rodale was very much involved in the passing of the National Organic Production Act, which is legislation out of Washington, D.C. under the USDA. And that was really a huge step in our agricultural systems to begin to get farmers to move away from chemical dependent agriculture. So whenever a consumer buys an organic product at the grocery store, they can trust that that food was grown in a methodology that didn't include chemicals. Now, Rodale feels that it's time for us to raise the bar, and we've come forward with a new standard in agriculture called the Regenerative Organic Certification. You could, if your audience is interested in reading more, they can go to regenorganic.org. And this is the highest bar in food and farming production that not only accounts for getting the chemicals out of the system, but it also takes into effect, how is that farmer managing the soil? How is that farmer treating his or her employees? Are they being paid a fair wage? And number 3 is, how are animals in those agricultural systems being treated? Because currently the USDA organic certification does not account for soil health, human labor, and animal welfare. So Rodale is really saying we want to create the highest bar in agriculture, and we've done that by rolling out this regenerative organic certification.
Oh, wow. There's so much to this. So let's say that I'm a consumer and I'm a mom, or, you know, just someone who's listening to the podcast, and maybe I never really understood the value of soil. Can you tell us, so when we look at soil, and why should we be concerned about the chemicals and what's happening to our topsoil and what makes a healthy soil? I mean, why is it important to us?
Well, let me start by saying that soil is alive. And I think, Laurie, I think this has been one of the most overlooked ecosystems of our time. So did you know that 1 teaspoon of healthy soil has over 9 billion microorganisms in it? That's more than there are people on the planet. It is
in 1 teaspoon?
1 teaspoon. And we know from our science that, not just Rodale science, but we know that soil is the most complex ecosystem in the world. So
wow.
It's more complex than oceans, it's more complex than rainforests. Soil is a living, breathing microorganism. It's a microbiome of activity, of life that you and I depend on every single day. And we are killing our soil at rates that are very concerning. And there was a report that came out from the United Nations a few years ago that shows that if we continue on the agricultural path that we're on, we have about 60 growing seasons left before it's lights out for Homo sapiens. So we are at this tremendous tipping point in human history where we need, as a species, to reconnect with the soil and to begin to understand the power that lies within. And I think I'm rambling now, and I'm not sure if I'm getting track of your original question.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so I was telling you before we started, I interviewed Luis Hoyos, and he was talking about, his Racing to Extinction movie and how we're, killing the plankton from the oceans, and they create half of the oxygen we breathe. And that was kind of there. And now we're talking about soil and 60 years of growing seasons. That's really concerning. I mean, like, this could be in, maybe not my lifetime, but certainly my children's. It's very disturbing. So what can we do as consumers to help in this process? Because it's one thing to hear it, but people want to feel moved to do something. Is there anything that we can do?
Oh, there's so much we can do. In fact, we as consumers, we are the solution. Mm. The good news is that we can literally eat our way out of this problem. What I mean by that is that we as consumers, there's something that our mutual friend, Dr. Scott Stoll, often says. He often refers to the power of the plate. And I believe that eating is a spiritual act, that we have a choice that we make 3 times a day. And I think it's time for us as a culture to begin to go a level deeper. So I think you can clearly see that consumers are waking up to this idea of human health and how food can have an impact on our health. But I think it's time to ask a deeper question. It's not enough to ask what we're eating, but we have to begin to ask how what we're eating was produced. We need to befriend farmers. We need to develop a relationship with people that grow our food. We need to support those farmers that are stewarding our soil with the highest degree of integrity. There are countless farmers out there that are doing tremendous work to reverse our course. And those farmers need to be supported by consumer demand. So every time we as consumers choose to purchase organic produce or go to a farmer's market and support our local farmers, we are actually taking one step closer towards reversing the course that we're on. And you know what? The more that we do that, and right now organic is about 6% of the total US food market share. So 6% of all the food we purchase is certified organic. 14% of all the produce we purchase is certified organic. Economic theorists believe that when we get to 15%, that's when it's lights out for the agrochemical industry. That's when their financial models become unviable. And so that's maybe perhaps a long-winded way of saying that we as consumers get to be part of the solution. And to me, that's very exciting.
Now, when we do that, because I talk to a lot of patients about their health and buying food, and the question of organic always comes up. And of course, I'm always saying organic is best, but I just don't want you eating plants if you can't afford it. So the cost is an issue, which seems so bizarre to me. Here you are, you have the certified organic, which is the healthiest for us, but yes, it costs more because of all the things, I'm assuming, all the steps they have to go through in order to get that label. Will that ever change? Will the fact that something's organic, the carrying the label, make it more reasonably cost? Is it subsidies? What is the issue?
The issue isn't necessarily the certification. You'd be surprised the cost to get certified as an organic farmer is minimal, and frankly, our government, the USDA, provides a cost share for farmers. So there is monies available to farmers to help offset the cost of their certifications. And if anyone in your audience is interested in learning more about that, we have plenty of resources on Rodale Institute's website. However, you may remember at the conference this past year, I showed a slide that showed that in 1960, we were spending about 1/3 of the amount of our GDP on healthcare than we were on foods. We were essentially spending 3 times more on food than we were on healthcare in 1960. And today we spend double the amount. We spend about $3.2 trillion on healthcare versus, I believe, I think the numbers are 600 million of our GDP. So it's like staggering to think that we spend more than double the amount of money to take care of sick people. And so what I would argue is that organic food is simply the real price for real food. We externalize the cost of food. We as a society have asked for cheap food, and that's exactly what we've been given, is commoditized, poorly produced, soil degrading food is what ends up on most of our plates. And the reality is that between healthcare costs and environmental costs, we're paying for that on the back end. As a citizen of the United States, our tax dollars are ultimately paying for those things. And so we need to begin to shift our mindset. I think it's a mindset that we have a society that will spend to go out to dinner, with for a family of 4, let's say, and think nothing of spending $100 at a time to get mediocre food when, I can say personally that my wife and I make decisions we opt out of going out to dinner so that we can afford to put organic food on our table. So I think it's all relative. I think we need to begin looking at our priorities as a culture and reprioritizing. Now, yes, there's definitely a subsidy factor that is weighing in as well. Organic farmers don't qualify for the same subsidies that conventional farmers do. The banking industry, the financial systems that prop up our conventional ag systems are in some ways artificial. They're incentivizing bad behavior. And they're incentivizing our farmers to continue to perpetuate the chemical production methodologies that they're using because it's safe. Banks don't want to take risks. And so our organic farmers have to take on more risk than conventional farmers, and therefore there's some costs associated that you and I pay for. But I think we're making a better investment with our monies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that makes a lot more sense. Thanks for explaining that. So when you think about, let's just the act of farming. So can you just walk us through, so you have, a soil that's been tillaged and, just decimated. How do you go about regenerating it? I mean, is it always possible, or is it has to have something still alive in it?
Yeah, this is such a beautiful question because, as I mentioned at the outset, soil is a living, breathing organism, and it begins to regenerate the moment we begin to feed it and give it life. So it's just like a sick patient. When you begin to care for that patient with attention and care and nourish it, give it nutrients, rest it, water it, feed it, it begins to come back to life almost immediately. And we've seen soils recover in less than a year. We see dramatic improvements. And the way we measure health of soil, there's many ways of measuring the health of the soil, but we often talk about soil organic matter. It's a particular measurement of organic matter in soil. And here at Rodale Institute, we purchased the farm that our research is on in 1975. And at that time, the soil organic matter was about 1%. And today, our soils exceed 6% in certain parts of the farm. So, soil does take time to build. It doesn't happen overnight. However, the microbiology reverses course the moment you begin to manage it differently.
So then, can you tell me a little bit about your no-till roller crimper? Because I saw you present about this and I just found it utterly fascinating.
Cool.
So can you explain why that's better than regular like plowing and tilling up the dirt?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So you as a medical doctor understand the human microbiome, correct? Mm-hmm. And that's really the sort of as I understand it, sort of the microbiological life that lives within us that makes us who we are. And it also has a lot of impact on our ability to be healthy humans. Well, the soil in the same way has a microbiome. And oddly enough, I think there's science that's beginning to connect the same microbiology that lives in our soils, or the lack thereof, with that in the human gut. And so we began to disrupt the microbiome of the soil the moment we began to till and plow at the rates that we do in today's agriculture. A lot of farms around the world rely on tillage to suppress weeds and to cultivate and to ultimately grow row crops. And plowing and tilling are extremely disruptive to the life in the soil. Healthy soil has, I think it's something like 70 earthworms per square foot of soil. So earthworms are what aerate and what carry nutrients deep down into the soil, and they are really sort of this part of the symbiosis of what makes healthy soil, as well as all the bacteria and the fungi and the viruses that create the environment for healthy soil. And as we run plows through our fields, we're just breaking all of that apart. We're killing earthworms. We're killing microbiological life that upholds the soil. And so we at the Rodale Institute have pioneered a new methodology of farming. We call it organic no-till. Jeff Moyer, our CEO, was the person who actually invented the roller crimper. It's got a funny story because people ask him all the time, Jeff, where did you get the idea for the roller crimper? And he said, oh, it was real simple. I was just watching my wife one night make pasta at home in the kitchen. And it essentially is a tool, an implement that goes on the front of a tractor. And we're asking farmers to plant a cover crop. So cover crops are these nitrogen-fixing crops that a farmer should plant in between their cash crops. You never want to leave soil bare. You always, as a farmer, should have something green and growing all 12 months of the year on your farm. And so a farmer would typically plant a cover crop in the fall after they harvest. The cover crop establishes in the fall, it comes up and really matures in the spring. And then that's when you would come through with your roller crimper. Instead of plowing, you're actually rolling that cover crop down. You terminate it, it dies, but it provides almost like a mulch on top of the field. And then the farmer, in one pass, seeds their next crop at the same time. So they roll it down, and in the back of the tractor, there's a planter, and they're planting their soybeans or their corn. And then as that corn comes up through that weed bed, the carpet, the cover crop, protects the weeds from growing, but the cash crop makes it through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so now they make it through because they made the area for it to actually grow with the plant.
That's right. When the planter comes through, it cuts a slit in the ground. So it cuts a slit just wide enough to drop the seed in and for that seed to come up through the carpet.
Oh, wow.
So everything else decays and creates mulch and food for all the earthworms and all the microorganisms.
Right.
So you're kind of building the soil, and at the same time, your cash crop doesn't suffer from weeds.
And so then during the between your cash crops, you're getting this coverage, so your soil's protected as well, right? So it's not going to blow away or wash away.
That's 100% correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
This is revolutionary, and what's exciting is that it's actually being adopted at scale on farms that are thousands of acres all over the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's not just for small scale agriculture. We're saying we can replace the plow with the roller crimper.
It's amazing that it took that long. That one night. Isn't it incredible how one night of someone making pasta? Well, that is amazing.
If you really want to get historical, if you think about it, the advent of the Industrial Revolution was in what, 900 AD? And do you know what was the catalyst for the Industrial Revolution?
No.
It was the plow.
Really?
So Jeff Moyer might have disrupted 1,100 years of history.
I guess there's only one Jeff Moyer every 1,100 years, huh?
Oh, actually, maybe one in all of human history.
That's amazing.
Jeff, you'll know what I'm talking about. He's an awesome guy. There will never be another Jeff Moyer.
I can't wait. So that kind of leads me to another question, speaking about regenerative soil, but there's also regenerative health. And I know you're working with one of my favorite people, Dr. Scott Stoll, about the Regenerative Health Institute. Can you explain what that is exactly and what's the mission?
Yeah, this is so exciting. So, and by the way, you and I share a mutual friend. Scott is one of my dear friends as well. And I'm just so blessed to have him come into my life. He's been an amazing friend and partner, and he's actually the medical partner to Rodale Institute. So we've established a relationship with the Plant Nutrition Project, and that the genesis really was J.I. Rodale's original mission statement for the Institute. He said in 1947 that healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. So that's our mission statements on the back of my business card. It's on our website, and it's the guiding light to everything we do here at the Institute. And when I think about that and contemplate it, I think what J.I. Rodale was saying is that our job as farmers isn't to produce food. I think he was saying that our job as farmers is to produce healthy people. And really the catalyst for working with Dr. Stoll is that when's the last time a doctor talked to a farmer? You know, we just don't have those conversations, and we want to begin that conversation. We need our medical professionals engaged with our agricultural community, because it's our farmers that are on the front lines of human health every day. You know, in an ideal world, the doctors are sort of they're not on the offensive. Our farmers should be on the offensive, and they should be the ones looking out for our human health. And you know, maybe that would have ramifications so that less people have to go to the doctor. But with all of that said, we've established a relationship with the Plant Nutrition Project because Rodale Institute wants to start a conversation, the first conversation in the world, really, that would put doctors and farmers in the same room. We want to build a physical center here at our 333-acre campus. We're calling it the Regenerative Health Institute, and it's a newly formed nonprofit, a project between Rodale Institute and the Plant Nutrition Project that would create a global hub for doctors, farmers, and scientists to come together and to begin to link soil health with human health. That's really the center point of the conversation. And in this center, we would certainly be conducting science, but we would also create a physical place, a hub of education where people can come and learn and get continuing education around this topic, but also create a global dialogue that could impact policy and ultimately our medical system. So we're in the early stages, and we're looking for support to help us to build this initiative and to get it off the ground. And so we would value any and all support from your audience that might be interested.
Cool. And I will there's a donation page for that on your website?
Yes, there is. And they can just go to rodaleinstitute.org and then search Regenerative Health Institute, and I'll
find the link for sure. Okay, cool. You know, you could almost create a new specialty, right? So you have the physician who's also a soil expert and sharing that information to kind of be the liaison between.
Yeah, can I tell you a quick story?
Yeah, please.
So we, at Rodale Institute, we have a regional medical well, it's a healthcare system, and it's a hospital system called St. Luke's, and they're one of the biggest players in the state of Pennsylvania. They have a campus about 20 miles away from us. It's a new campus they built a few years ago, and it was built on about a 400-acre farm, I believe. So they bought farmland, and then they built this state-of-the-art, hospital and facility, but they only needed like 40 acres to do that. So they leased out the rest of the land to a local farmer. And in that spring, after the campus opened, the CEO of the hospital was sitting in his nice new office and opened up his fancy new window, and a smell came through the window that he'd never smelled before. He knew it wasn't that something was wrong. It didn't smell natural, so he called his facilities director. The facilities director came down to the office, and the CEO explained what he was experiencing, and the facilities director said, "Well, yeah, of course. Look out your window, and there's the farmer preparing his fields with an herbicide for the spring. He was about to do his spring planting." And the CEO said, "Well, we can't have that. Those are toxic chemicals he's spraying, and this is a hospital, and there's sick patients in these beds." And so the CEO called Rodale Institute, and we've embarked on a partnership that's been real revolutionary. We've actually built I think it was the first farm to hospital in the United States, where Rodale Institute actually has employees at that farm, at that hospital, and all the food that is grown there ends up on patients' plates.
Wow.
And St. Luke's has now started a residency where the residents can spend time on the farm learning how to grow food.
Okay, see, that's just awesome.
Isn't that
is that a family practice residency?
I believe so. I think that there's internal medicine and people from that discipline that go through it, but I can verify.
I can look. My daughter's just in her third year of medical school, so she's wanting to do family medicine. So I'm going to maybe send her some information. That's awesome. Yeah, cool. And wow, that's you had mentioned a little bit about your own health challenges, and could you share with us kind of your journey and what you felt is key as far as on your road to recovery?
Yeah. In fact, I felt ill in the fall of 2016 with unexplainable symptoms. I was actually on a different career path at the time. I was serving on the board of directors here at the Institute, but I had a different, day job, so to speak, and felt ill in September of 2016, and started going back and forth to then my family doctor, and over about a 90-day period, it was back and forth, and was very sick with all kinds of symptoms, and he was doing all kinds of blood work and never found anything in the blood work, never really could explain what was wrong with me, and it was very scary, and frankly, it put me into a really deep depression, because when I went to my own doctor, who I thought I could trust, and he turned me away because he couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, I thought that something seriously was wrong, and it was very scary. What's interesting is that at one point that same doctor put me on a broad spectrum antibiotic when he couldn't figure anything else out. He just threw some antibiotics at it, and the antibiotic itself made me very sick. And what's interesting is that what that did to my body is not unlike how most of our conventional farmers treat the soil. Glyphosate Roundup is really a broad spectrum antibiotic that kills all the life in the soil. And after I took that antibiotic, my life was never the same again. And I did eventually get to a very literate doctor, a functional medicine doctor, who helped me to find the root cause, but also treated me for some of the toxicity of that antibiotic. And, it's interesting, what ultimately healed me, there was no medicine to heal me. It was food, it was lifestyle, it was rest, it was mindfulness and meditation practices, it was movement. It's been a long road to recovery, but ultimately my doctor taught me to empower myself through food and through lifestyle to ultimately heal. So it was very, very, it was a very interesting journey, but I think that journey is really what informed and inspired the work that I'm doing today.
So you are someone who's in the process of being regenerated after you were decimated by chemical means as such, and infection. And now you're regenerating through the healthy means that we're supposed to, how to take care of ourselves. And you're sharing that inspiration with the soil and people at Rodale and your work. That's pretty cool.
Well, it is, and I would take it one step further and say that I've actually, one of the biggest awakenings for me in this healing journey is that what I'm actually what was most helpful to me in this process was thinking about farming my body, because it's like how I've treated my body has really created the environment for healing.
Wow. That's so very true. We take it so for granted, everything that we do in every moment. We're like, oh, we're too busy. Well, you're going to be at a point when, like you, right, you come to a halt because your body's like, yo, I've had enough. Jeez. So I'm going to have questions too. Some people ask, you have regenerative soils and, practices. Does it require animals in order to regenerate soil? Have you found, what does that process look like? Is that necessary?
Yeah, I'm certainly in no way advocating for consuming animals, and I would certainly speak very much against the consumption of animals that come from confinement area feeding operations, because that's some of the most toxic food a human can put in their body. However, Rodale's science would suggest that by a farmer bringing animals into the overall system can improve soil health. Actually, it will improve soil health. No, you do not need animals to have a healthy, vital, regenerative system. You can use leguminous cover crops. They're not as effective than some of the animal systems that we've replicated here. But we need to begin to think about animals as part of a system and creating a healthy life for them too. And our science has found that when you bring animals into agricultural systems, it does improve soil health. If you think about it, the Great Plains, some of our most arable farmland in the world, was built by bison that were migrating over those lands for millennia. And it was really that sort of migratory pattern that built some of those soils. So yeah, I would say that animals in a system certainly improve soil health.
I think I remember seeing a video, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, where they took some land that was had been decimated, and they did see they used that migratory pattern type thing going, and it did help regenerate. But it's interesting because some people are so with their ethical treatment of animals, which I absolutely agree with. They don't even want them to be a part of, even if they're not harmed, it's even that migratory pattern, which is interesting. So, for me, I'm like, we have to have a place for them. We can't just let them go. If they're used to being the domesticated animals, we do need a way of caring for them as well. So I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I can tell you this, that, I don't think anyone is in favor of putting animals in confinement. They don't belong in confinement. Animals belong on pasture where they can have a much happier, healthier life.
And in eating the food they were meant to be eating. Absolutely. So then, as far as your current state, where you are at the Rodale, what would the future look like? So what would be the ultimate future that Rodale would like to see and say, our work is done? So it'd be kind of like, what is your vision?
Yeah, well, the vision is to transition all farms and farmland from conventional chemical methods to organic. We've actually set a goal. We're calling it 1 to 5 by 25. Right now, sadly, only 1% of America's farmland is certified organic. And so it's about 1 million acres. And so we've set an ambitious goal of 5 million acres, or 5% by 2025. So really the next 5 years, I can't speak to, I don't know what an endpoint looks like, because even once all the farmland in the world is transitioned to organic, then Rodale still has work to do, because our science is what's informing better practices. Just because someone transitions doesn't mean we want to foster a mindset of continuous improvement on farms. So I don't think our work will ever be done, but over the next 5 years, we want to see America move from 1 million to 5 million acres.
So what type of carbon footprint happens when you move to organic? How much that reduces?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you would ask that question today, because just yesterday there was a very concerning headline that came out of, I think it was PBS NewsHour, that was actually it was a very, in my opinion, it was a very inaccurate news piece, and our science could actually poke quite a few holes in the article, but it was talking about organic farming actually creating more greenhouse gas emissions than conventional, and it's not true. Rodale Institute has done enough science, and other organizations have done enough science that have shown that, regenerative organic methods store carbon in the soil. Plants, they metabolize carbon, and carbon is stored in the soil. When soils are managed correctly, we actually have proven that we could pull most of the global greenhouse emissions that are in our atmosphere. If we just switch all of America's cropping land, not even grazing land, but cropping land, if we shifted it to regenerative organic practices, it would store all of the global carbon emissions on an annual basis. So we know that these systems have tremendous ramifications for climate change, and we have enough studies that would show that organic systems can feed the world. That's the other thing you hear all the time is, well, can organic really feed the world? Yeah, we have more than enough food on this planet.
Right.
That's not the issue. And in fact, Rodale science has proven over 40 years, we have a 40-year study that would show that organic systems outperform conventional by up to 40%, especially in years of drought and extreme wet. So
wow,
that's not an issue.
that's incredible. So basically, with all the interviews and things that I've learned and read, I mean, this literally comes down to what is on our plate and the choices that we're making 3 times a day.
Yeah, conscious choices.
Yes, exactly. Conscious choices, consciously feeding our bodies well, which helps the environment, the animals, and the soil, and long-term health of our planet. I mean, it literally is. I mean, it's just, people say, oh, I'm so hopeless, I'm one person. I'm like, yeah, but you're one person among millions. If all million of us choose this, or billions, that's where things will change. And I love the tipping point component of that too. I hear anywhere between 10 and 15% of society, when we do that, that's when it's an accepted practice. So hopefully it's moving the plant-based diet forward.
Yeah.
One step at a time. But
absolutely.
Amazing. So I know we're running out of time. Do you have any last bit of advice for someone who may be interested in the Rodale? Because I know you have a ton of programs. I'm a vet myself, and
really?
Yeah. And I was like, darn, if I'd have known about this, I might have got, well, I was a doctor in the Air Force, but what a cool program you have for vets. But I was attracted to that. But I mean, tell us, for someone who might be intrigued by what they're hearing and they're like, well, maybe I want to look into what, maybe switching gears or switching careers, and where should they look and what should they do?
Well, certainly our website is replete with all kinds of resources and information. So I would highly recommend rodaleinstitute.org. On there, if you're interested in coming out and spending time with us, training with us, interning with us, we offer a myriad of opportunities here at our research farm. We've also opened satellite campuses in Iowa, Georgia, and California. So there will be opportunities for people across the nation to connect with those satellites. I also highly recommend on our website, hopefully by the time this podcast is published, there will be a new resource called The Truth About Organic on our website. It's a downloadable PDF that will really go deeper into everything that I've addressed today. And that's going to be a great resource. But I really encourage you to follow us on social media, opt into our newsletter, consider supporting organic farming research via the Rodale Institute, and I can assure you that you will be joining us in healing the world.
That's phenomenal. Excellent. So I'll be putting the links. When will The Truth About Organic be available?
Sometime in the next few weeks, but I'll get you an exact date.
Perfect. Awesome. And thank you, Jeff. This was a very insightful and helpful conversation. I'm sure we could continue talking, but I understand you have to go. So I do appreciate your time.
It's been a real honor and a pleasure to speak with you today, Laurie.
Awesome. Thank you. Maybe we can do it again and talk about The Truth About Organic and really dive deep into the organic and the conventional.
I would love that opportunity to do a part 2.
Awesome. Sweet. We'll definitely plan that then. So
keep up the great work you're doing. What you're doing is so important and so needed. And we need people like you to help get the truth out there.
Well, I appreciate it. It started just as a place to host places for to send patients, go listen to this, because I got so tired of telling these amazing stories, and then it just turned into an opportunity to meet amazing people like you. So it's a win-win.
Cool.
So, but I so appreciate it, and thanks everyone for listening.